Hey everyone, today is a sensitive topic, trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about exposure to pornography in my own life when I was very young and what subsequently happened throughout my childhood. And this is going to be tough to hear. I don't know if I've even talked to my husband about this or a lot of people. Some people know, some people don't. But I was raised in a Catholic home, Catholic grade school, Catholic church, etc. Dad was a firefighter, Mom was a nurse, and I remember having a pretty normal childhood. It was void of hugs and kisses and the normal things you get from parents that are very affectionate, and it just wasn't in my house. And so around the age of 9 or so, I don't remember, I was very young. It was when I would ride my bike all over. My dad was a firefighter, so he didn't work for us. So I'd ride to see him at the fire department. And my mom one time said to me, hey, go to your dad's work and look in his wall locker and tell me what you see in there. And so okay, whatever. So I rode there and went in his wall locker, and I saw he had pornography, which were Playboys, in the top of his wall locker. I didn't know anything about it. We didn't have it at home. So that was my first exposure to porn at the age of around 9. And I didn't know what it was for, and that's what my mom sent me to do. And subsequently then, a situation in the neighborhood happened where there were I was probably 9 or 10, 2 teenage boys lived in the neighborhood who were kind of trouble, and we would all hang out. So I'd go to my neighbors' houses and whatever, and one of the boys took me in the basement of the home, and they had pornography, Penthouse and Playboy magazines in the basement, and he opened one up, and I saw women with full bush back then, back in the 70s, 80s. And I remember one of my also earlier exposures to pornography. And also my friends' fathers had pornography, normally just magazines. And because we didn't have cable, we didn't have internet back then, so it was always through pornographic materials. And then I would go on to babysit, and the fathers would have pornography around the house. And when I was a teenager, the fathers would make inappropriate sexual comments to me in front of their children and joke it off, etc. And moving on, I was best friends with a girl in high school. I think I was 14, 15, and I was asked to spend the night at her house, which was normal. We swap houses, and it was really hot, so we were sleeping in the basement that day, the basement rec room. And her father came down. I was only 14. He sat behind the bar. I was still awake, so we were chit-chatting, and he pulled out these novels, like books, and he said, here, read this. And I remember it was a graphic sexual novel about a young girl and military soldiers, and then he came out from behind the bar, and he didn't have his shorts on. He had a wife beater t-shirt and sat in front of me. My friend was sleeping on the floor, sat in a chair right next to her, and I watched him masturbate in front of me. And I remember waking my friend up and saying, let's go upstairs. And so I woke her up and took her upstairs to the second floor, and it was so hot. I didn't say anything. And a few years after we graduated high school and we had kind of parted ways, her boyfriend came and told me that that man who was her stepdad had molested her as a little girl. And so I said, well, he masturbated in front of me. So he said, you got to go to the cops. So we did go to the police department. I'm the one who could have pressed charges because after my friend had been molested, it's so young. It was past statutes for her, but it wasn't for me. So I was now 18, talking to the police about experience I had when I was 14, 15 years old. And so I could have pressed charges, but then her mom said, please don't press charges. He's kicked out of the house and he won't be back. And I said, okay. Come to find out, within weeks, that man was back in that house. And I was no longer allowed there. So they protected him. And it's really, really sad. So from a very young age, because of my exposure, I was groomed to believe that women were to be objectified, sexualized, and used for the purposes of men's pleasure. And that whatever a man wanted is what you said yes to. I was told to never question authority. And that is what led up to my subsequent rape in the military. I was raped by a fellow soldier who came into my barracks room at least twice, had me alone for enough time where he was able to rape me while his infant son was sleeping in the second bedroom in the apartment. So I'm telling parents, trigger warning, please watch what your children are exposed to. Please make sure when they're using their electronic devices that they're not exposed to pornography. Unfortunately, this is happening, and it took until I was 40 years old to get to the VA and finally tell my truth and get the wires uncrossed so I could finally find value as a human being in this world. And it wasn't until then that I found my worth, that I realized I didn't have to do what was requested of me. And I realized I was more valuable than my body parts. And I finally met someone who didn't objectify me and who didn't treat me like I was a piece of meat. I found someone who was my very best friend and partner in life. And I can't tell you how long it took to undo what was drilled into my head as a little girl. And today I sit here and I know my value and I know my worth. And there's a lot of damage inside my tender heart. And slowly, over time, I have been able to get therapy and get help and to start undoing the damage that was done when I was little. So I'm just saying, parents out there, please keep an eye on what your children are exposed to. And they're little. You know, I just remember when my girls were teenagers, I didn't want them to watch any movies or shows when they were little that it had to do with sex or violence. I wanted to make sure they were old enough, maybe 14, 15, until they realized appropriate sexual and healthy behaviors, appropriate relationships, that they could say no, that their bodies weren't used, that weren't meant for the pleasure of men only, that they had the right to their bodies, and just to know they had value in this world. So I'm not saying I was a perfect parent, and I'm sure because of what I had went through, it did affect my parenting in certain ways. And I may have done things out of my irrational brain that may have come across as not being a good parent, or I may have faltered in certain ways. But all I know is it took until I was 40 on up to get help and get therapy. And now, if I had children, I would definitely probably do it different. So anyways, all I know is I can make a difference going forward. I can help other survivors. I can help other parents. But most important, please keep an eye on what your children are looking at. Please, I'm begging you, don't allow them access to the internet, parental blocks. They don't need to have phones on all the time. And most important, talk to your kids about sex. It's never too early. When my children asked about sex and how babies were made, I explained it to them that daddy has a penis, mommy has a vagina, and when they join together, there's sperm and egg, babies are made. And I always said, when you are older and you meet someone who respects you and you fall in love, you know, this is the gift you give your partner. This is the most wonderful gift you can share with someone who loves and appreciates you. So that's what I always said. So anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about. I hope this helps, and I'm sorry about the trigger warning, but this is my truth and this is my life. So I'll be back. Bye-bye.